Hello and welcome. This is all about Ukraine. Trends, global politics, and deep analytics made by Ukrainian journalists to the whole world. Is the Russian withdrawal from Kherson a deception plan? Where could more than 3 million Kievans be relocated? And do we have to expect the military support reduction after the US elections? More of that right now. This is all about Ukraine. Like, share, subscribe. Ukrainian army continues successful counter-offensive actions across the front line. The Ukrainian defenders are approaching the occupied Kherson region kilometer by kilometer. In recent days, more than 10 settlements in the southern directions have been liberated from the Russians. About the situation at the front, see in our review.
Under the pressure of Ukrainian armed forces, the Russian occupying forces begin to leave their first line of defense, which they have tried to put up a month ago after a large-scale withdrawal from the northwest part of the Kherson region. Russian troops have already fled from a dozen villages and also Snihurivka, a strategically important city on the Inhulets river's bank, having lost battles there. As they retreat, Russian troops blow up bridges in order to delay the advance of the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian armed forces' offensive is slow-paced since all settlements and important infrastructure facilities on their way have been mined. The offensive is advancing in several directions: to the south along the Dnipro River in Berislav direction, and from the right and left banks of Inhulets River to the south of Snihurivka. Russian troops are also retreating west of Kherson, although not on the same scale. Meanwhile, Ukrainian artillery and HIMARS destroy Russian columns moving to Kherson or to the river crossings leading to Dnipro's left bank. They also target river crossings, such as the pontoon crossing built under the Antonivka road bridge in Kherson, among others. There are still about 20,000 Russian soldiers on Dnipro's right bank, including a large number of paratroopers, the core of the professional military Putin still has. This indicates that Putin is clearly trying to save at least part of his army. The armed forces of Ukraine will try to prevent Russian troops from relocating to the left bank of Dnipro. Russian troops will probably put up their new line of defense along Berislav, Vysoke, Oleksandrivka, Kherson's Ring Road, Bilozerka. Meanwhile, Russian troops have already prepared 3 lines of defense on Dnipro's left bank for their retreat. The city of Kherson is to become the new battlefield soon.
Russia to withdraw troops from Kherson. This is topic number 1 in the world's media in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war. Let's talk about the consequences with the British military expert Glenn Grant. So, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Vitaly Kim, the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration, said, then quote, "If Russians say something, that means they will do the opposite." Is there any deception plan in withdrawing troops from Kherson?
I think you've got two or three choices here of what they're looking at. I mean, the first big one is it may well just be a political act, politics with the aim of letting Kherson go and then asking for a ceasefire. And let's be clear, there are an awful lot of countries and leaders around the world who would be more than happy to see Ukraine stop fighting, and this would be an excuse that they would use. So this is an extremely dangerous moment politically for Ukraine. I mean, when you then look at the military options, well, one option is is to fight to the death on this bank. And they've not shown that they're intending to do that, really, because otherwise they wouldn't be pulling back so quickly, because that's allowing Ukraine to actually to get much closer within artillery range than they were before. I would have expected them to fight further out to buy time for more troops to actually to cross as well. But if they are pulling back and they're going to pull onto the other side of the river, then you have to ask whether there's any sense then in actually fighting a counterattack over the river, because it might just be more worthwhile to actually to go north or east in the battlefields there and take Russia on again where they're much weaker than they are here.
Yeah, and but how Russia's retreat from Kherson, the right bank of the Dnieper River, can change the war in Ukraine?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure it actually does change it much. I mean, they're just moving further away, that's all. So I don't think in military terms, it doesn't make a sudden big change unless the Russian troops actually collapse and start going backwards towards Crimea. But they don't look as though they're going to do that.
Yep.
So I think that this looks to be a bit of a, for me, a bit of a gamble on Russia's part by creating lines of defense on the other side of the river, because that assumes on Russia's part that that is where Ukraine is going to fight them next. And Ukraine doesn't have to do that. It could fight them somewhere else, like Zaporizhzhia.
And can we assume that this withdrawal means that Kremlin is ready for negotiations?
Oh, no. The Kremlin's not ready for negotiation. Or if they do, it's only to buy time while they sort themselves out. I mean, let's be clear. We're in a battle for the death, to the death. This is not going to stop before death. One side has got to win this. And the Kremlin is not going to do anything soft in any way, shape or form. They will do everything they can to win, and the war will keep going. So if they want negotiations, it's just to get time so that they can come back again and kill more Ukrainians.
Just to get some time, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you one more time. That was Glenn Grant, the British military expert, and this is all about Ukraine. Residents of the frontline territories on the border of the Mykolaiv and Kherson regions live without electricity, gas and water and under constant enemy fire. Despite the round-the-clock danger, dozens of people categorically do not want to leave their homes. Our journalists will tell how they prepare for winter and how they manage to remain optimistic in such situation.
Until recently, the occupiers shelled the village of Shevchenkovo in the Mykolaiv region.
We lived on the ground all the time, otherwise we would have died because fragments flew here very often. Everything in the house was strewn with fragments in glass, crushed stone, asphalt, even the tiles were cracked, and everything was bathing in the basement. The halls were covered with boards and foam. We get out of the situation as best we can.
They shoot less now, woman says, but she still finds remnants of shells in her yard. Temporary calm she uses to the maximum. Lyubov with her husband have been collecting firewood for heating this winter.
We have a small sawmill, but there is not enough electricity, very bad voltage. Therefore, we take saw and chop firewood together with my husband. We are stocking up. The government promised us a stove, so we are waiting for it. There will be something to light the fire.
Shevchenkova has electricity and water, but no gas. However, residents aren't complaining. They are full of optimism.
Why should we cry? We are on our land, and we should be happy because our defenders are gradually expelling the invaders.
The closer to the front, the more difficult it is. We leave for the village, the name of which the Ukrainian military asks not to name. Now 25 people live there.
Bread and humanitarian aid are delivered to us. Soldiers bring water. I would like to connect gas and electricity, because it is of course difficult without it. They say that the transformers have started to be repaired. We will see. I have already forgotten when that light was. I use the stove and somehow over winter. I am not going anywhere. Two daughters ask all the time. No, I won't go. I don't want to. Scary, of course. Both cluster and phosphorus shells they used.
They are already used to shelling here. People were repeatedly asked to leave for a safer place, at least for the winter, but some, on the contrary, return.
We repaired the roof a little bit, but the house is intact, so we returned. We were in Odessa, but we really wanted to go home. Our neighbor's house was more damaged, so of course they will not come soon. We will definitely not return until winter.
Meter by meter, the Ukrainian military is liberating the southern regions, but the enemy should not be underestimated, they say.
Russian occupation troops are preparing for defense. They will not surrender the right bank of the Dnipro just like that. But Ukraine is also very seriously preparing for the liberation of its territories. It will be a very tough confrontation. For one of our shells, Russians have at least 10. They have much more ammunition than we do. But thanks to the supplies of weapons given to us by foreign comrades, we equalize the artillery duel. We stand on the same level. We win with speed and precision. We hit much more accurately than they do.
The Ukrainian military is also preparing for the cold weather. We are shown a trench of increased comfort, as they themselves joke. There is a stove here. Our defenders even set up a cafe and a bathroom. But on the front line, even hot tea is a luxury, because the enemy can notice the smoke and hit the position.
Brave people of brave country. Mass missile attacks by Russians on the Ukrainian energy system may provoke a new wave of refugees to Europe. There were even reports in the media that the authorities are preparing for the possible evacuation of the residents of Kyiv, the capital. It's more than 3 million people. If such a scenario is really possible, where the Kyivans will evacuate and whether the import of electricity can help Ukraine avoid a total blackout. Our journalists find it out.
The New York Times was the first to write about the possible evacuation of 3 million Kievs. Journalists had made such a conclusion after a conversation with Roman Tkachuk. Later, the head of the capital's municipal security department stated that his words were misunderstood.
The civil protection system must be ready for various scenarios, but this does not mean that we are now preparing for evacuation. To respond efficiently, we must have a plan for all possible scenarios.
However, the people of Kiev are already discussing such an option and considering where they will go. But not many are ready to go abroad.
I heard these statements. I understand everything. If necessary to evacuate, I will go to my parents in Khmelnytsky region. Abroad, no. Now is the time to be ready for everything, but I don't plan to leave Kyiv. I hope I won't have to leave. Where should all residents of Kyiv go? I don't think about going abroad.
If it is half a day, well, then we will wait. But if it is long time, then maybe we will go to the country. I think the worst case scenario has been voiced, but I really want to believe in the best.
Meanwhile, residents of the capital and other cities stock up on candles and get used to periodic power outages. Ukraine already went through this more than 20 years ago. The Bila Tserkva's hospital made its own flashlights from LEDs and batteries. They also have 2 generators of 5 and 55 kilowatts. So medical care is provided even in the absence of light, but preparing dinners for the sick has become a problem.
There are electric stoves in the food block, which draw a lot of electricity. Therefore, we need an additional generator, and we asked the city authorities to help.
At the end of October, the Energy Company of Ukraine ordered 1 megawatt from Slovakia to test the possibility of import. Currently, there is no need for such supplies, experts say, but in winter it may be required. The total technical possibilities of electricity import into Ukraine from the European Union is 600 megawatts. Deliveries are possible from Poland, Slovakia, Romania and Hungary. Although the last shouldn't be hoped for, given the support of Viktor Orban's government to Vladimir Putin. But the commercial possibilities agreed to Ukraine by the European Union of System Operators (ENTSO-E) were up to 400 megawatts for export and up to 500 megawatts for import at the end of October. This isn't enough to balance the Ukrainian energy system, considering the shutdown of the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the shortage of coal in warehouses. Experts say it is necessary to increase the available capacity for electricity import from the European Union by 1,500 megawatts. Large-scale commercial imports will help Ukraine solve the problems that arouse due to Russian attacks on our energy system, but will create another problem: who will compensate for the difference in tariffs for the population, the state or energy market players?
The operation of the energy system under constant attacks, risks and resources for resumption are the topics to discuss with Andreas Umland, the analyst at the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies. Good to hear.
Thanks for having me.
So, for the last week, all the media in Ukraine and the whole world are talking about the total blackout, especially in the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. And there's a risk of evacuation of more than 3 million people from Kyiv. Is Europe ready for that or not?
Well, what we see here is perhaps a repetition of what Putin already did a few years ago in Syria, when he was bombing Syria together with Assad and was then generating this flow of immigrants into the European Union, thereby then pressuring the European Union and also generating support for parties that were pro-Russian back then. So from the Russian point of view, that strategy certainly makes sense. And it could indeed happen that Kyiv will have to be evacuated if it cannot be any more supported with energy and heating and water.
Yeah, but what should be the European response to that? Maybe some more resources, I don't know, supplies and generators, maybe some urgent programs to support.
Well, we've seen already a number of announcements of the delivery of anti-aircraft weaponry, and some of it has already arrived. I suspect there will be more such weaponry, different anti-aircraft weapons. And also there is now an initiative from the G7 in which a number of countries have announced that they will support Ukraine in repairing its energy system and in helping Ukraine to secure at least some basic energy supply, electricity supply for Ukraine's cities.
And how Europe is gonna support all the Ukrainians who already are in Europe? Because many of the authorities have already said that if you are abroad, please stay there at least till the end of March.
Well, that is basically already in process. The refugees are being distributed in various countries, within, let's say, Germany, in various cities. There isn't by now a rather sophisticated system of help and support for these refugees. But of course, if there would be millions more, then indeed the European countries would be the resources also of the countries in terms of living space, medical supplies, and so on would be stretched. I think that is also the speculation by Moscow to create here a pressure on the European Union, which will then translate into pressure on Kyiv to basically give away territories and to make some sort of compromise with Russia.
Is there any fear among the European countries that there could be some blackouts and shutdowns in the European Union, in terms of the crisis, an energy crisis?
Well, there's now in Germany an initiative of the most pro-Putinist, pro-Russian party, the so-called Alternative for Germany, a radical right-wing party that is trying to generate panic in Germany and that is reporting alleged blackouts in various German cities. But in fact, there's very little of that in Germany, perhaps some singular cases that for a couple of hours here and there are blackouts, because now also Europe Europe's resources are stretched concerning energy, but there's no real energy danger, let's call it that way, for the European Union. I think that is a problem that is mainly now very relevant, unfortunately, for Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with All About Ukraine. Due to Russian attacks on the Ukrainian power system, the demand for power generators has increased enormously. Local authorities are developing programs to help residents of multi-apartment buildings purchase expensive appliances. And foreign partners supply generators for critical objects of Ukrainian infrastructure. Let's shed some light on that in the upcoming review.
Children's Corner, armchairs and bio-toilet. This is an underground parking lot of one of the Lviv high-rise buildings, which serves as a shelter for residents. After Russia started shelling Ukraine's energy infrastructure, people also bought an electric generator.
The main task we set is the possibility of heating during long air alarms. We will be able to include 2 or 3 UFO heaters in it. Also charge gadgets, connect Wi-Fi. Additionally, if there is a long-term lack of water, we will be able to start the water pumps and give people water for at least an hour so that they can stock up.
The 8-kilowatt generator was purchased by the Association of Co-Owners of an Apartment Building for approximately 60,000 hryvnias.
We have a reserve fund. We saved on some expenses and had money.
The Lviv City Council announced that it is ready to compensate apartment buildings up to 30,000 hryvnias for the purchase of generators, but powerful equipment is much more expensive.
We have a developed scenario and can provide heat to the house if there is no electricity. However, our efforts will be in vain if the resident don't purchase a generator. Water pumps must also work in the house to have a water supply.
How to help residents purchase generators, other cities are also thinking. Meanwhile, all Ukrainian hospitals which provide emergency care are already equipped with such facilities, the authorities report. In addition, foreign partners help Ukraine with electric generators. 17 European Union countries have already sent us 500,000 power generators. In particular, these are Italy, Poland, Slovakia, Finland and Germany.
And now let's talk about the global politics, world trends, and the Ukrainian agenda in all the processes with our expert, Yuri Fizer, our global news editor. Nice to see you, Yuri.
Nice to see you too, Vladimir.
So how was the last week?
Well, I would say this was quite a busy week with another busy week ahead. Russia continues to accuse West, with President Putin saying Western leaders want to weaken, divide and even destroy his country. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan convinced the Kremlin leadership to resume its participation in the UN-backed grain deal. Iran finally admitted it was selling its drones to Russia. North Korea strongly denied information that it has sold Russia its artillery munitions, and midterm elections to the US Congress.
Oh, that's cool. And what about the elections in the United States of America?
Well, Americans on Tuesday cast their final ballots in closely fought elections that will determine whether Republicans win control of Congress. And if so, it would give them the power to block much of President Joe Biden's initiatives in the next 2 years. These elections are very important for Ukraine because recently some members of the Republican Party said it was necessary for GOP to shorten or even stop sending security and financial assistance to Ukraine. For example, this is what a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, Marjorie Taylor Greene, said last week.
Only border they care about is Ukraine, not America's southern border. Under Republicans, not another penny will go to Ukraine. Our country comes first.
Oh, this is really painful to hear.
It's quite frightening to hear such statements, especially for us, people living in Ukraine, because we rely on these supplies. Our soldiers rely on these supplies in order to gain victories on the front lines. Nevertheless, most of Western political analysts are convinced that even if Republicans gain control in the U.S. Congress, Ukraine will still have the bipartisan support from the United States of America. Just listen what Ian Bremmer, Eurasia president and the founder, said.
If you talk to both Republicans and Democrats on the Hill, there is an overwhelmingly strong level of support for Ukraine and anger at Russia. You can find some progressive Democrats that are unhappy about the amount of money that's being spent. You can find some MAGA Republicans that will say the same thing. But when I look at 2023, between the extension of the existing Lend-Lease policy that Biden has been using to get the Ukrainians more military material, I look at how much money can be allocated from the Congress that is in place right now for the year of 2023, as well as the willingness of the Republicans that will be in office in what will almost certainly be a Republican-led House. I just don't see that shift very much.
So the willingness to support is still strong as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, it is. But this is what experts say. But let us listen to what people from Joe Biden's administration said. For example, Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor to the President of the United States of America.
I actually believe that, notwithstanding, again, comments that certain people have made, I believe there still is strong support on the Hill for delivering the necessary resources to Ukraine. And I think you will not see these kinds of doomsday scenarios that the purse strings will be pulled shut and it's over. I just simply reject that. I don't think our analysis of where the members are in both the House and the Senate bear that out. And some of the strongest voices with respect to support for Ukraine are on the Republican side. Some of the strongest are on the Democratic side. And yes, there may be an increasing number of voices that raise questions, but it will still be a very distinct minority.
So I really hope we will have this support. And let us hear what Press Secretary of White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, said.
We are confident that the United States support for Ukraine will be unflinching and unwavering. That's what we believe, and that's how we see this going forward. You saw Jake Sullivan say the very same thing while he was in Kiev on Monday and reiterated the United States will continue to support Ukraine across a range of areas, whether it's security assistance, economic assistance, or human rights assistance. Members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, have been clear about our enduring support for Ukraine, and under any scenario, to your point, to your question, President Biden is committed to work in a bipartisan fashion.
So, Volodymyr, I really hope that notwithstanding the election results, we will have the support from the United States of America and especially from the United States Congress. I will talk more about this with my guest, Igor Eisenberg, professor of Manhattan College, New York. Mr. Eisenberg, greetings and thank you for joining us today.
Greetings from New York and greetings to everybody who is watching. Thank you very much for having me.
So my first question to you is as follows. Did Republicans gain the control in U.S. Congress, at least from what we know now?
Well, the Republicans are on the way to get control over the House of Representatives. The results are not known yet, I mean the final results, but they're on the pretty clear way to get the control. But the results are quite different from those which were expected, because practically all observers, including myself, all people expected that Republicans will get a very significant majority. They did not get it. So likely they will have a majority, but very narrow majority, just a few seats. And this changes many things very drastically, because this is a big loss for former President Trump and for his influence in Republican Party, because Republicans built their campaign mostly on Trump's slogans. Trump had many candidates whom not only he endorsed, but actually he found these candidates. And many of these candidates, they lost their election to House. And because of that, the influence of far-right wing of the Republican Party may go down now. And this is very good for Ukraine, because far-right wing in the Republican Party, they are continuously against any support for Ukraine. And if their influence goes down, this really will be very good. And President Biden, yesterday, he expressed the hope that he'll be able to work together with Republicans and Democrats, and that the next Congress will be as supportive for Ukraine as current Congress. And so I really hope very much that the results are good for Ukraine, because the things could be worse if too many far-right Republicans were elected. But this did not happen. It seems that there will be maybe about the same number. If you think now there are 57 far-right guys in the House, there will be about the same 57. Maybe even less. And with regard to Senate, we still don't know results, and likely the results will be known in December, when there will be runoff round in Georgia.
And we really hope here in Ukraine that the support from the United States of America will be the same as we had before. One more question, Mr. Eisenberg. A few words about Russian nuclear threats. Before the elections, the U.S. President Joe Biden often said that in case the Russian military decides to use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine, the response from Washington will be very harsh. Will this remain unchanged after the elections?
Yes, I'm absolutely sure this will remain unchanged, and because President Biden repeated that several times, and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, he also repeated that several times, even using very strong words, because several times he said that there will be absolutely catastrophic consequences for Russia if Russia will do that. So, and we know now that Jake Sullivan had some consultations with Patrushev and with Ushakov, Putin's foreign policy advisor, and then it's clear, because when Sullivan said before that what will happen if Russia uses nuclear weapons, it was delivered to the highest levels of Russian government, and now it's clear how it was delivered. So this will not change. I believe that absolutely this cannot change.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for all the help we have from the United States of America. And thank you, Mr. Eisenberg, for joining us today. Igor Eisenberg, professor of University Manhattan College, New York. So, as we heard, the United States of America, Volodymyr, will still help us as they did it before.
Yeah, it's really good to hear. But let's get back to the European continent. Will the election process affect much of the European Union?
Well, I must say, Volodymyr, that it is not as bad as we thought. Europe exhaled with relief amid a weak Republican result in the elections to the United States Congress. European officials were most worried about efforts aimed at isolating Russia and reducing aid to Ukraine's army. Experts warned that the next 2 years could still be very difficult for US-European relations, even though a Republican wave may not appear this year, Europeans know that the end of Trump and Trumpism has not yet arrived. Therefore, they must draw up plans accordingly. In recent weeks, many European observers have projected that the GOP would easily take control of both chambers of Congress, but it didn't happen. So I must say, Volodymyr, that Europe in general supports us in our rightful fight against Russian aggression, and they provide us with all the necessary humanitarian, financial and military assistance we need. Some countries give us more, and these countries are mostly those situated in the eastern part of Europe, because people living there know what it means to live under the Russian oppression, occupation, and they know quite well what to do in this situation. Prime Minister of Estonia, Kaja Kallas, let's hear what she says.
Of course, we have to continue the military support to Ukraine so that they can defend themselves. We see that the breaking point could be close. We have to put all the pressure on Russia politically, economically, by sanctions. And what we also have to do is to see how we can use the freezed assets that we have from Russia in Europe so that we could use them for the benefit of Ukraine.
And as I've always said in this part of the program, together we will win, because we have this support and we have this help from the European countries and from the United States of America. So this is all for today. More next week. And now back to you, Volodymyr.
Thank you so much, and see you next week. That was Yuri Fizer, our global news editor. More of that right now and all about Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. This is all about Ukraine, trends, world politics, and deep analytics made by Ukrainian journalists to the whole world. Sofia Kohut, the journalist and our social media expert, is already in this studio. Nice to see you, Sofia.
Nice to see you too.
So how do Russian authorities explain the withdrawal from the right bank of Kherson region?
Well, this time Russia is not just lying, but also eliminating own collaborators. Let's hear more details. Russian army occupied the Kherson region in the south of Ukraine during the first days of full-scale invasion. Since then, local citizens have been suffering from Russian terror. There is no connection, food supply, or even permanent electricity. Kremlin soldiers continue constant shelling and literally erase peaceful towns from the map. Moreover, Russia kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children from the temporarily occupied territory. Also, Kremlin pursues forcible displacement of local population. The liberation of the Kherson region has been going on for months. The armed forces of Ukraine started a spectacular counter-offensive. The battle for the administrative center of the region, the city of Kherson, was about to loom. And now Russia is officially claiming Kremlin soldiers are withdrawing from Kherson city.
Mr. Defense Minister, after a comprehensive assessment of the situation, we offered to take up defense on the left bank of the Dnipro River. I understand this is a hard decision. However, at the same time, we will save the most important, lives of our soldiers and combat capability in a grouping of troops in general. And it is perspectiveless to keep those troops on the right bank of the river.
A few hours before this address of Russians was another one. The so-called deputy governor of Kherson region and collaborator Kirill Strimousov ensured there are no losses in Kremlin army located in Kherson, and even reported about some successes on the battlefield. Obviously, imaginary successes. Probably Strimousov's thoughts did not match with those Russian high-ranking officials have, because half a day later, Kirill Strimousov died. Occupiers say it was a car crash. Yeah, a car crash right on the day Russia announced it is leaving Kherson. Coincidence? I think not. Anyway, Russian army are frankly saying They have no weapons or equipment to fight.
We are moving to another bank of the river. I see Kherson for the first time, as well as the Dnipro River, and now I understand why happens what happens. It would be madness to defend the city with such supplies.
Just imagine this for a second. You come to the city you have never seen before to protect it. You kill people who live there. You destroy homes, happiness, future of somebody, and you don't even feel sorry for it. Anyway, believing Russian is such a pointless thing to do. Ukraine sees no signs of Russia retreating from Kherson without the fight, President's office reports. So armed forces of Ukraine are in positions and ready to protect their home.
South. We are moving gradually, strengthening our position step by step. There is a lot of joy in the media space today, and it is clear why. But our emotions must be restrained, always during the war. I will definitely not feed the enemy with all details of our operations, either in the south, or in the east, or anywhere else.
Yes, details of operations. Ukrainian meme forces declassified Russian secret plans in Kherson. Some Russians are a bit smarter than those who are temporarily in Ukrainian Kherson region now. For example, these for sure wise guys prefer dying before going to Ukraine after being mobilized, as this kind of death might be less miserable. Meanwhile, not yet mobilized Russian soldiers are also preparing for the future. In Moscow, they made an exhibition about funerals, so soldiers-to-be can fully experience how it feels when you come to conquer Ukraine. Ukrainian soldiers otherwise are not just protecting their home from invaders, but also have time for art in between battles. Our servicemen and servicewomen are making bas-reliefs in the trenches. This is Ivan, Ukraine's defender, who is making a picture of Ukrainian Cossack, an ancient warrior. This masterpiece for sure deserves an award, something like an Oscar. And we do have one. For the third time since the full-scale Russian invasion, American actor Sean Penn visited Ukraine. This time, Mr. Penn brought his Oscar statuette to Kyiv.
This is for you.
Oh, Sean.
Yes.
No.
Please.
That is yours.
No, I feel terrible outside. It's just a symbolic, silly thing.
Yes, but
if I know this is here with you, then I'll feel better and stronger for the fight.
This Oscar statuette is the symbol of faith in the victory of our country. As the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, says, it will be in Ukraine until the end of war, until the victory. Volodymyr, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sofia. Yes, the Oscar goes to Ukraine. Sofia Kohut, our journalist, and with the latest updates from the social media. So as she has already mentioned, the art in trenches and Oscar, let's talk a bit about the culture in terms of war, because this is also a weapon. A stage and an auditorium were equipped in the basement of the Taras Shevchenko Regional Museum and Drama Theater. The bomb shelter will allow performances not to be stopped during air raids. Theater in the shelter has already received the first spectators. A number of theatrical premieres have already been planned for the stage and the shelter. Theater goers equip the bomb shelter with their own efforts. The first of them, Dialogue with a Sniper, will take place at the end of November. The story once again proves that Ukrainians cannot be broken. No matter what happens, they will never give up. So that was all about Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe on our YouTube channel, Espresso All About Ukraine. More news during the week, find out there. See you next Friday. До побачення.